you for visiting the Africa Rising Cycling Podcast, where we share the big and most interesting cycling stories from across the continent of Africa and from around the world where African cyclists are racing and riding.
This week, we're on the ground in Namibia, working with the Namibian Cycling Federation on a very exciting project. This is part of our Virtual Performance Centre Network program, but more on this on a future podcast. As we are here, we had to arrange various meetings with key folk all across Namibia. When right in the middle of the country, in the pretty remote town of Omaruru, we met up with the legendary Dan Craven. Omaruru is situated near Mount Erongo on the usually dry Omaruru River, around 250 kilometers from Swakopmund, the nearest town on the coast. Dan is one of the pioneers of African cyclists racing in the professional peloton, so we wanted to share his story and what he is up to now, as it's pretty cool. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Hello. So my name is Dan Craven, born and raised Namibian, and in certain cycling circles better known as Dan from Nam.
Though you're a legend of African cycling, can you give our listeners who may not know your story a brief overview of your journey from Namibia into pro cycling?
I only left Namibia properly for the first time to go to university in Stellenbosch in South Africa, after which I was able to wrangle through smiling and being nice to people a ride on a amateur team in Switzerland, but just on the Italian border. So I spent 4 years from 2005 until 2008 racing the Italian amateur scene, which included lots of 2.1 UCI races. But being from Africa, I was very much always on my own. I had no backup. I had some Polish teammates who I shared the house with who had an agent who looked after them, but a Polish agent never helped me. Also, because I only really started cycling in my final year of high school and only started racing in my first year of university, I was significantly older than most of my teammates, which meant that the Italians, being old school at the time, very not that interested in the new countries, aka the potential out of Africa, they all were like, oh no, Dan is old, he's last year under 23, or he's now in the elite category, therefore can't be that talented, or his time has passed him by. But I had younger teammates who had actually been riding for longer than me, but were seen as talented because of that. So I always had to go through my whole cycling career very much looking after myself. And I ended up getting a ride for Rafa Condor 2009, where I was able to stay for 3 years. So I stayed in the UK. And as much as I loved the people and the culture, the weather just cooked me. Or should I say, froze me, wet dog. So I loved my time there, but my racing really didn't progress. And after a few detours via Baku, which is an Azerbaijani team, and Bike Aid, amazing German team doing lots of good things in Africa as well, I was able to get onto Team Europcar with Thomas Verclair, the French World Tour team, although it was only World Tour briefly while I was there my first year. Raced the Vuelta a España, and after that I got onto what is now the Israel Cycling Academy team, which now has a new name. I was there in that team from its second and third year of existence, where it had a different team manager. It had a very different vision. It was all about developing riders from non-traditional cycling countries. And so that just, I absolutely loved it there. But the team has become something different, and global politics has obviously also changed to make it all very different to when I had been there. But I only had great experiences and loved my time there. And after that, essentially all of the years of privateering and running around looking after myself, I basically picked up too many injuries and was not worth signing by any big team. So I still joined another German team, an amateur team that did more racing in Africa. And that was really amazing, being able to do Tour Burkina Faso, Tour Senegal, raced in Tunisia, just did some beautiful racing. But throughout my career, I was also able to do 2 Olympic Games, London and Rio. Quite a few people saw me in Rio because I did the time trial on a road bike, and kind of went viral 3 times. So I raced at the top of the sport, but I was at the bottom of the top for a lot of my career, and was more well known for being a journeyman and essentially just enjoying what I was doing. And 2 bikes, 2 wheels makes me feel like a kid, and I love it.
It's wonderful to hear you talk passionately about your career. Now let's talk about after your career. You get into steel bikes. Tell us more.
So during my time racing with Rafa Condor also made steel bicycles, and I got curious and I looked into it. Condor made a steel road bike for me that I actually raced professional races on, and really just enjoyed the bike and loved how it rode and loved the story about it. So in 2012, took a steel frame building course at Bicycle Academy in Frome in the UK, and just absolutely fell in love with this material. Steel bicycles may not be the performance bicycles most people think of when they think of carbon fiber bicycles, but the weight and the aerodynamics benefits are not really going to change most cyclists' rides, especially when it comes to gravel bikes. And with a steel bike, so many of them are extremely made by hand. And coming from a land of makers, coming from Africa, where so many people are so good at using their hands at making things, I really felt, why are there custom steel frame builders in Portland, Oregon, and in London and in Bristol, but not in Africa? So after my racing career ended, we came back to Namibia to found Onguza Bicycles, where we hand build, beautifully crafted steel bicycles that we sell all around the world. I mean, New York City is basically our largest market where we sell to, and it's we have bicycles that win races. So when people tell me that steel bicycles are heavy and slow, I basically laugh because they don't know what they're talking about. Um, while at the same time just being these creations that mean so much more to you. I like to think about bicycles a little bit like a Swiss watch. You buy an Apple Watch, and you know the day you buy it that within 5 to 6, 7 years, that thing is either going to be in a dustbin or it's going to be at the back of a dirty drawer somewhere. Whereas if you buy a Swiss watch, you put so much more care into your purchase decision. It sort of connects so much more deeper to your personality. The kind of watch you buy is very specific. And at the same time, you want your children to inherit the thing. And that's how I think about steel bicycles. You really care about how you are buying it, why you're buying that one. But the difference is that our bicycles still perform. I mean, the Traka, which is basically the biggest gravel race in Europe, one of our bicycles came third there a few years ago. Not too long ago, the biggest gravel tour in the world, the Gravel Burn in South Africa, my friend Martin Fryer, who is not a professional cyclist, came 13th in the pro category riding my bike. Um, so I'm just really, really proud of these creations that we are making and coming out of a place that no one would expect something like this to come from.
Now, let's get into the real work behind the scenes in your workshop here in Omaruru. Talk us through creating bikes in Namibia.
Namibia is a land of makers. There's so little here that everyone needs to really be self-sufficient, really look after themselves. So people are so good with their hands because you have nothing, so you have to make something out of nothing. And we're in this place where the vast majority of people use their hands and are so used to using their hands that they're good with their hands. And yet everything that's made here is either for local consumption or is kind of low value tourism trinkets. And I'm like, but if you're a tourist in Namibia, it costs a lot of money to come here, which means you've got some cash to spend. Why do you want cheap trinkets? Why are we not making more like jewelry that's really like something you want to buy for your loved one? And so it really upset me how we don't have refined goods, we don't have brands coming out of this country. And so I'm basically so bothered by that I want to do something about it. That's one of the many reasons why Onguza exists. We're trying to use the skills we have, where we have a competitive advantage against the rest of the world, and sell something in a place like New York or London that's desirable by name, recognizable. And my background is bicycles and my love for steel bicycles. It sort of all just came together, and I was like, we got to do this. So Petrus and Zacharias used to be farm workers for my parents. I mean, in 40-degree heat, fixing fences, digging holes. And it's like, but you're absolutely beautiful human beings and gentlemen. You're so good with your time, your hands. You're like responsible, you're everything. And yet you're doing this low-income job. And so they have now been trained up to become master frame builders. Because if we can build bicycles in small little Omaruru on the edge of the desert, what else can we do in Namibia? And I know that I've had an impact on some younger Namibian cyclists. And so now that I'm not a professional cyclist anymore, it's like if we can do something like that in the business world that can impact even more Namibians, that's part of the dream. While at the same time building a product that I just really am proud of, really believe in. It's the bike I want to ride for the rest of my life. And if you care about the products you own, if you're into fast fashion, be into fast fashion. But if you're the kind of person who likes Hyatt denim made on the coast of Wales in the little town of Cardigan, because it's a handmade pair of jeans that means more than just being pants on your bum, that's the kind of products I like, I want to own. I'd rather have something that means something to me and is beautiful and will last long and can be repaired and is good for the planet.
Obviously, your passion is palpable. We're now in the workshop for Onguza bicycles. Talk us through how you get from this box of raw tubes to a completed bicycle.
So there are so many different numbers that you can input because you need to, you need to consider absolutely everything. And I mean, there it keeps going over there. When you're building a bike, there's so many different things you can consider, need to consider. For example, over here, I need to know the shoe size of the customer if it's a custom bike, because I need to know if they're going to have toe overlap. And if they are going to have toe overlap, how do we change it? Why would we change it? When can't we change it? There's just so many parts that go into this. So that's basically where a bicycle starts. Next to the computer always is this. This is the Columbus catalog. So this is just steel tubes. You can see there's a few steel tubes one can choose from, and quite a lot of data. So the tube diameter, the length, and then the butts. So if you look here, you can see the tube is thick on the side, then it gets thin, and then it gets thick again. Because that is where you cut it, that is where you braze it, that is where the junctions are, so the stress points are, so it needs to be a little bit thicker. But the tubes we work with are like 0.6, 0.4. So it's like super, super thin. Most people, when they think of a steel bike, they think of the bikes that were raced in the 1980s. So if we go through to the storeroom now, so it's completely different tubing. And I just told you about the butting. Let's see, where's a good tube? This is approximately the same diameter, right? It's 190 for this, which is like a quarter of the length of this. So when you talk about steel tubes, this is what everyone thinks you're talking about. but this is what we're talking about. And you can see this huge box full of all of the different types of tubing that we use, because every single tube has to be thought through. You use that tube for a reason instead of this tube. So we take that design, we take these tubes, and then we have these boxes where we then lay it out and we print out the design. People will quite often be like, oh, are you doing assembly? And it's like, no. There's a very big difference between assembly and manufacture. To turn this into a bicycle, that's not assembly. That's very much manufacture. And that's very important when you come to trade deals and duties. That's when it all starts mattering.
Or what is it you think about manufacturing here in Namibia that makes your bike special?
Namibia's got all of this workforce that is desperate for work. Namibians want to work, but we're never going to compete with Asia on price. And one of the big reasons for that is in Asia, if there's a factory, they get all of their spare parts, all of their ingredients from the same town. We get all of our parts. I mean, the tubes come from Milan in Italy. The dropouts might come from America, they might come from Europe, they might come from Asia. Like the brass rods we bring them in from Spain. Like all of our parts come from all over the world. So we are never going to be able to compete in the race to the bottom price-wise with something coming out of Asia. Where I think we are able to compete is we don't have Africa as a manufacturing place, doesn't have a reputation. And so we're in a place where we are able to have an impact on what the connotation is. And so I believe that we have the workforce that can be trained, can have the skills, has the desire to be trained, have the opportunity to create the reputation. And so if we can create high value goods with good reputations that come out of this place, that can be our place in the market. We're never going to be building the cheapy things, but we could be making the really good medium to high priced items. And that's where I feel that we fit in.
That makes a lot of sense, Dan. Now, we're now in the workshop where the magic happens. Can you talk through what's happening here?
Kai and Petrus are busy shaping this tube because we want it to look different and have different properties, essentially. And it's so much of a squash and repeat, do it slowly. Over here, we've got the printout that I was showing you on the computer earlier. This comes over with one of those boxes from the corner. So we have these little cutouts that come with it. So these have to be on the design. We have to have the exact tubing sizes on there so that these mitre templates, and they're little cutouts that you cut out, and you, with sellotape, you stick it around the tube, and then it will show you the shape that the tube needs to be cut, which sounds easy, but then you have to cut a metal tube with a hacksaw and a file until it fits onto another tube absolutely perfectly, that you don't see any daylight between it. And then you have to have these two mitre templates on opposite ends of the tube perfectly aligned to each other. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And the reason that they need to sit so perfectly is when you heat brass with a torch and a flame at 900 degrees Celsius, metal, heat, there's going to be warping happening. There's going to be all kinds of stuff happening. So the neater the fit is, the less likely there is for any distortion. And you measure it, and you measure it, and you measure it, and you measure it. And then you've got a digital angle finder, which you pop on here to get the degrees right. And then your bottom bracket goes on here, and that's when you then start building. And once the bike is built, what Saki is doing here is now making all of the welds perfectly smooth so that it almost doesn't look like it's separate tubes. Under the paint, it blends nicely. This is all brass, steel and brass, but The dropouts are stainless steel. So any touch point we like to do in stainless steel, because the wheel is coming in and out, which means the paint's eventually going to wear off, and you want that to be stainless steel just for a little bit of corrosion resistance. Brass and stainless steel don't work together. So this has to be done with silver. So we build bicycles with this immense amount of time and effort and precision and silver, kind of jewelry. It's not just a bicycle. And I mean, here's Saki working on metal with a piece of sandpaper. Like, again, the amount of attention to detail, the amount of refined work that goes in. And he's actually working on the number plate. So this bicycle is number 115, built by Petrus Zacharias in Mufenge. You haven't met him yet. He's at the paint booth in 2026. And this bike is going to America as well. Somewhere in the vicinity of New York. I forget where exactly. So when the bike is built or during the process, you come up to the alignment table, you put the bottom bracket on here, and the frame lies across the table, and you take the height gauge and you measure at different points, and you flip it over and you measure again to make sure that your bicycle is actually straight. Again, at those temperatures that they work, metal, it takes a lot of work to make sure that you're doing it right. And afterwards, facing and reaming and threading and making sure that everything fits.
So there's clearly a huge amount of work going on here by hand. How many bikes a year, realistically, do you think you'll produce?
But this year, we're hoping to get close to 50. You can see by the amount of hand tools lying on the table of how many tools it takes, how much effort, repetitiveness, precision goes into it. It's really essentially a labor of love. And over here, Petrus is working on a stainless steel bike. So that's why if you look at it, you can see how shiny it is because we're busy polishing it. So this is essentially like a knife and fork, just like polished. It's going to get a carbon fiber seat tube. So if you look at that, like,
Oh, wow.
so this is a really, really special bike. Getting all kinds of special features on it.
They love that flow of carbon.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. With top of the range parts, SRAM red, everything. This is the really, really special bike. I cannot wait to see this.
And Dan, could you give our listeners an idea of the pricing of your Onguza bicycles?
So, this frame fork painted, frame fork headset, seat post through axles, no gears, no wheels, painted, shipped, duties, taxes paid in the UK would be 2,500, which if you think that is a mid-range, a good carbon fiber frame would cost the same. That comes out of a mold in Asia that's made in a factory that pumps out 50,000 a year.
Last 5 years.
And won't last 5 years. For us, this is a bicycle that's designed to be able to last time. And it's essentially, it's a little bit like a Swiss watch. It's something you buy, you have an attachment to it. It's not just something you buy and want to get rid of. Like, you never feel precious about a cell phone. But these bicycles have a very different meaning to the majority of the customers.
And as we look at how you finish the bike, you have 180 paint samples in front of us. How does this process work?
So we have 18 frame color options and 10 word mark options. I just grabbed 2 of the same, so I'm just going to pop that back in there. So here is 13A and 12A. So this is frame color 13, this is frame color 12, and then the gray is the logo color. There are so many color combination choices. You get to, yes, it's a size medium or size large, but you customize it before it gets painted. So it is a one-off. And then you've got, what are the chances of someone else having the same bike color?
So it is. That's why we call it a customizable bike, because it is actually a custom bike.
So we're now in the paint booth, and there's a beautiful looking frame here with some incredible yellow mottled paint on the inside of the forks. What is that?
So that is our cow, because we like to celebrate. Most people, they think of Namibia, they think of cheetahs and they think of elephants and lions. But the people of Namibia, what's important to them are the cows and the goats, because that's what they live off. And so we use the cow, and the yellow sort of represents the people, the energy, the vibrancy. So we always have that on our bikes. You can see we've got 5, neon light tubes, because it needs to be daylight. The painter needs to be able to see every detail of everything he's doing. It's been a hard journey, but Zacchaeus has stepped up massively. It's amazing.
We hope you enjoyed this journey through the Onguza bicycle company here in Omaruru in Namibia. You can tell by the way Dan talks that there's huge amounts of passion in these beautiful bicycles. You can find out more at onguza.com, and we'll put some links in the bio for this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Africa Rising Cycling Podcast. If you like what you have heard, please do share our podcast with your friends and on social media. Leave us a review or even make a donation to Africa Rising Cycling. All of this will help us to continue to bring you fascinating stories about African cycling.